To talk some stuff I don't want to talk about. I was hoping to kind of wind down January and then hopefully we'll see. I'm getting feedback. I'm mulling the whole thing over, but hopefully not really do much on Facebook anymore just because of reasons outlined earlier. It's just kind of a mess, and I just don't frankly feel like dealing with it anymore. I sat on this for a few days because I wanted to make sure enough information came out. I wanted to make sure I had time to kind of judge people's reactions after that initial footage of Renee Good being killed up in Minnesota. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't rushing to judgment one way or another just based solely on the one video. I wanted to see if more came out, and of course more has since then. So over the past several days, I've seen as much footage as I care to on the thing, and I wanted just to kind of talk about the broader situation that this points to, the sickness in this country. And when you hear me say the sickness in the country, if you immediately think, oh, he's talking about Democrats, that's part of the problem. If you immediately think, oh, he's talking about Republicans and MAGA, that's part of the problem. The whole country is sick, not just a portion of it. If I go back to 2008, which is what I've done kind of looking at the history of this, and I could probably go back further than that, but 2008 in recent memory, Republicans have vivid memories of Obama at the time calling law enforcement stupid, calling for people to rise up against them in various ways, resist the man, right? We had him actually, depending on who you talk to, there's room for interpretation. He either implied or openly called for violence against American law enforcement officials. And it happened. You had people like beating up law enforcement. It was a thing in the Obama administration. Democrats may not want to admit that, but it happened. So we have a scenario where the Obama Messiah, because the left has their messiahs and the right has their messiahs, was telling his flock, see these people with badges? They're the enemy. You can resist them. They have no authority over you. And in fact, it would be a great idea if you actually took them on. 8 years of that. And so law enforcement, understandably, is a little freaked out whenever they encounter liberals after that point. Anybody associated with liberals. We know demographically that the vast majority of illegal immigrants vote Democrat, even when they're not legally allowed to. It's a thing. Now, we can speculate. Maybe that's why the Democrats let him in. Who knows? It's hard to say at this point. But it's a thing. Historically speaking, illegal immigrants have tended to support Democratic politicians. And so when Trump comes along in 2016, now we have a Republican. Now we've got Make America Great Again, America First. He's pro-law enforcement. So now, these law enforcement officers, who for the past 8 years under Obama have had targets on their backs, now all of a sudden, presumably those targets are off because Republicans are kind of in now, even though you had a Democrat Congress and, whatever. So the messaging was leave law enforcement alone. So you've got 8 years of law enforcement, the majority of which demographically lean conservative, being abused verbally and in some cases physically by the left for 8 years under Obama. That takes a toll on a person's psyche. So now, under Trump 1.0, presumably some of that pressure is off. And it wasn't as widespread back then, but you did see a little bit. You started to see news reports of law enforcement officers assaulting people. Bad cop type stuff. Bad cops have always been a thing. Like there's a reason why that's a movie trope. The bad cops have been a statistically low number of cops, which is why over the course of my life, I have generally respected and trusted law enforcement. I've never really had issues with law enforcement in general, as long as they're operating within the confines of the law. But you started to see this kind of shift in Trump 1.0, where you started to see news accounts come out. And of course, there's a reason for that. The corporate news always has an agenda, left or right, whenever they publish a news story. And so what does that do? The left, who Obama said, watch out for these cops, they're bad news. Now all of a sudden under Trump, they're starting to see news reports of cops being violent to unarmed citizens and all this kind of thing, right? So if you're a liberal, an Obama-supporting liberal at that time, you're starting to see, oh, wow, Obama was right. And so what happens? We have this cycle starting where you have leftists generally who are skeptical or hostile against law enforcement. You have law enforcement that knows that, so they become defensive around liberals. And so we get through Trump 1.0, then we get into Biden. Right? We get into Biden. And Trump 1.0, remember the kids in cages? They carried over into Biden. It was never just a Trump thing. And in fact, people have actually tracked it back to Obama's time. Of course, it wasn't reported on. But anyway, kids in cages, that's an immigration thing, right? Separating parents from their children, et cetera, at the border. And in a lot of cases, putting the children specifically in inhumane conditions. We have evidence that under both the Biden and Trump administrations, some of those kids, if not a lot of those kids, were trafficked. So this is the ugliness of this whole thing. It's bipartisan. So we get through Biden, and we kind of go back to the Obama days, where it's like leftists are in now, and it's like, okay, let's up the rhetoric against law enforcement again. And of course, law enforcement, if you're law enforcement, on a good day, your life is in danger anytime you go out. On a bad day, you may not come home to your family. And these guys know this. So you've got this back and forth, which naturally escalates the hostilities between leftist activists and law enforcement. And we get to now. And people have said, well, why weren't you guys complaining about it? Some of us kind of were. I was probably not as vocal as I could have been, but some of us were. And if you look at the alternative media, I don't mean the mainstream alternative media. I don't mean like the Benny Johnsons and the Nick Sorters and the Alex Joneses and all these guys. I don't mean those guys. I mean real independent journalists like James Corbett, Derek Brose, Ryan Christian, Whitney Webb, etc., Ben Swan. People like this were consistent in their reporting all the way through Obama, Clinton, Trump, Biden, and Trump. I didn't always see it. I wasn't always exposed to their coverage. Because like so many, for the longest time, I just thought, oh, there's Fox and there's everybody else. There's talk radio and then there's CNN or whatever. Like, yeah, I fell into that trap too. But the point is that where we're at now, all of this stuff that I just talked about under Obama, Trump 1.0, and then Biden has been ramped up at least an order of magnitude under Trump 2.0. Rubio, I forget the timing on it. I can't remember if he did this before he was Secretary of State or if he did it after, was encouraging Venezuelans to migrate to America, legal or not. Get out of there. That's a socialist regime. Of course, he's hostile to anything in his mind that even looks remotely like Cuba. So he was encouraging. And then we forget, let's be balanced here, under the Biden administration, whoever was in charge, we still don't really know, both Biden and his border czar, Kamala Harris, were publicly telling the illegals coming up from Mexico in those caravans, don't come. Now, of course, we know that they let a whole bunch of them in, right? But anyway, So now, Trump 2.0. What do we have? Obama. Biden let all these illegals in, and now, okay, so now what do we have? We have, if I go back to Abrego Garcia, following the process, legal. He's not a citizen, but he is legal. Rounded up, deported, sent to CCOT, a modern-day concentration camp in El Salvador. And they said, well, he's MS-13. Trump famously was shown, a picture on whoever, I forget who was interviewing him, CBS or whatever it was, and he's like, no, see, it says MS-13. It's like, no, that was a graphic imposed over his tattoos, which they were saying represented MS-13. That's never been proven in a court of law. As far as I know, he's released right now. They sent him down there. Of course, the media reported on it. There's your first clue. The mainstream media reported on it. We find out he was sent down there illegally. And then people start talking about denial of due process. And then, of course, the MAGA crowd, at least a lot of them, are like, well, where were you talking about due process under Biden? And it's like, some of us were. Some were. But you're not going to see that if you only watch hardcore MAGA news sources or if you watch hardcore leftist news sources. You only see that if you watch stuff in the middle. So yes, Abrego Garcia was illegally deported to El Salvador. The Trump administration said, well, we had to because he was MS-13 and he was a child trafficker, and they just made up all this crap. We know that it was bogus. They said, oh, well, we can't release him. It's up to El Salvador. It's like, we can't. So El Salvador moves him out of CCOT to a lower security prison after their president said they couldn't do that because he was a terrorist, because that prison is for terrorists, supposedly. And then he gets brought back to America after the Trump administration said over and over and over again, we can't do that, It's like, okay. So either you're just completely incompetent or you're lying or maybe both. So some of us were out there saying, hey, this is wrong. And then we start to see more and more cases of ICE, sometimes Border Patrol, but usually ICE, rounding up people, usually brown, and shipping them overseas. And then we find out the media forgot his name. They started calling him the gay barber. I don't even know his name anymore because that's what everybody called him, because it made the point. Down in Florida, there was a gay barber who they deported down to CCOT. They said he was a kingpin or something for MS-13. He wasn't. He was just a gay barber in Florida, and he was here legally. They abused that man in jail, in that concentration camp. He reported being raped. Oh well, oops. Guess who's watching this the whole time? The liberal left that MAGA so loves to hate was watching this. They were watching the Trump administration defend the denial of due process. Back in the 90s, Justice Scalia, you don't get more conservative than Antonin Scalia, was part of a ruling that said any person in the borders of America is given due process, period. Why? Because the Constitution says persons, not citizens. What is due process? The Constitution doesn't say, but it's a process that's due a person. Basically, if you're going to accuse someone of doing something illegal, let's initiate a process that finds out if that's true or not. Imagine that. But when you just round up brown people and you send them overseas without due process, and then you go, oops, oh, they were a citizen? Oh, wow, we had no idea. Yeah, because you didn't you didn't, all it takes is a little court hearing. Bring your papers, let's have a look. And Trump's up there like, what, do you want a big jury trial for it? Like, no, nobody's calling for it. That's a straw man. legally. And Republicans are supposed to be the rule of law, the constitutional party. Legally, you are required, before you take action against anyone on a legal basis, to give some kind of a process where you actually confirm the legality or the illegality of their actions. I'm fully in support. If somebody is here from any country in the world, even Israel, if you are here illegally and it can be proven after due process, I am in favor of sending you back. I am against illegal immigration from any country whatsoever. But we're talking people who are going through the process. There are case after case after case of someone going to a hearing. Why would you go to an immigration hearing voluntarily if you were trying to be here illegally? Why would you voluntarily interact with law enforcement and the courts if you were trying to violate the law by being here illegally? You wouldn't. But yet, ICE was picking these people up on their way to or from these hearings, stripping them of their visas or their green cards, and shipping them overseas. The left, who is generally pro-illegal immigration, sees this. And in their minds, I'm sure they're hearing Obama. See, I told you. I told you law enforcement was evil and corrupt. I told you. Yeah. And then now, we have legal observers like Renee Good, who have seen all of this. They know that ICE is going around roughing people up. They know that ICE is going and putting themselves in front of vehicles as justification to shoot people. Not necessarily in Renee Good's case, but in other cases, it's been documented. There have been mainstream news articles talking about it. Because ICE is hiring people who are not qualified in a lot of cases to be conventional law enforcement. People are attracted to ICE because they want permission to kill people and break things. The Trump administration is actively recruiting people in that mindset that are clearly anti-immigrant, not anti-illegal immigration, anti-immigrant. Why? This is a problem. When I look at the Renee Good situation, what I see is I see a woman who has seen all of this stuff going on with ICE. She's clearly your poster child for the liberal left. Has a wife in quotes, all this stuff. You know, there's like a typical short-haired Bernie Sanders voter with her. Like, you don't get any more textbook liberal than these women. They're there in a suburb, or I guess it was a suburb, in Minnesota. They were in their neighborhood, and they're out watching ICE because they know that ICE is probably going to be rounding people up there in their neighborhood and either putting them in jail, roughing them up, or maybe even deporting them illegally. Why? Because ICE has been doing that for months. So their bleeding hearts are leading them to try to intervene. Hey, this is a social injustice. We've got to do something about this. We'll get out there and watch ICE, and maybe they'll behave themselves. We'll kind of, let them know we're there. You watch the footage, yeah, they were getting nasty. They were kind of being jerks, the women. It's not violating any law, though. Last I checked, we have free speech. The videos that I've seen, they were not actively interfering with anything, although they were clearly there, and the law enforcement clearly knew they were there. By the time I got done watching, best I can tell, Renee Good was kind of like, okay, we're done. You can see my plate number. Come at me. They were saying, whatever. Charge me, whatever. I'm leaving. She turns to leave. Bumps the guy. Maybe. It's hard to tell. And he shoots her. Dead. Okay. So my position is, we have this problem because of everything I just said. You have Renee, as a symbol of the hardcore left, being indoctrinated that law enforcement is evil. ICE is clearly Trump's preferred arm of law enforcement. So they hate Trump. They put the two together. In their mind, that's probably what's going on. So she's there because of that dynamic. In my opinion, she should not have been there. You have kids. You're engaging with armed law enforcement officers who you know are on edge already. Don't put yourself in that environment if you are a mother. I don't care if you're left or right. The officer, supposedly, was dragged by a car back in June, required some stitches, because he was trying to apprehend a Guatemalan, supposedly, reached in to try to open the door and got dragged. Okay, I can understand why he would be a little nervous about being hit or dragged by a car again. And yet in the footage, we see him walk around the front of the car, which in my research is against policy for law enforcement. You don't do that unless it's absolutely essential. She's doing a K-turn. You can see her back up to the left. She's preparing to leave to the right. She cuts her wheels to the right. He moves out of the way after he shoots her in the face, shoots her 2 more times through the driver's side door, just to make sure, I guess. So in my mind, I see in this one case the whole microcosm of what we're dealing with. This is a guy who, the best I can tell, I haven't done this myself, so this is secondhand. Apparently, his social media is hardcore MAGA, hardcore anti-immigrant. Go figure. A guy like that is a perfect candidate to join ICE. So you have all of this emotion built up from Renee directed at ICE and from ICE directed at people like Renee. This kind of stuff is inevitable in that kind of environment. But where I'm going to draw a line is I'm not going to blame either one of them for the death. I think they're both responsible. I'm going to put the blame on society at large, and I'm going to put the blame specifically on people who buy into this blind partisan racket. I have seen people in my social media who I thought knew better post things, paraphrasing. You're an evil person if you don't support ICE. What do we mean by supporting ICE? Like I said earlier, I support deportation of illegal immigrants after due process. ICE has shown that in a lot of cases they're not willing to do that, and the Trump administration has given them a rubber stamp to go ahead and keep doing that. The Trump administration has shown that they're not going to hold ICE officials accountable for violating the law. Why? Trump said it himself. He who saves his country violates no law. This is an administration that doesn't care about the legalities involved. They have an agenda, and they want to achieve that agenda, law or not. The fact that they are doing what they think they should be doing is the law. The left sees that. Independents see that. This is why the Republicans are going to lose the midterms. I support ICE when they are operating legally. I do not support ICE when they are operating illegally. That goes across the board for any law enforcement or any politician, anybody in general. I support legal immigration, not illegal. So the fact that I am calling law enforcement out for violating the law, if you're a person that thinks that that makes me a horrible person, then you've got some things to think about. I am of the opinion that all lives matter. Remember back when Republicans were saying that because BLM, Black Lives Matter? Well, it's not just Black lives. I mean, we all matter. Like, what do you think? It's kind of racist to say, like, okay. So when we have ICE going around and asking for papers, please, which they're doing, I just saw a video of a guy that got arrested, a citizen, because they asked him for his ID, and he said, no, I'm a citizen. I don't need to show you my ID. You're ICE. ICE doesn't have jurisdiction over U.S. citizens. They roughed him up and arrested him. He was brown. Imagine that, right? Do you see ICE going around to white guys? No, typically not. Liberals see this. The left sees this. The left, who is so prone to call MAGA racists and bigots, is watching ICE target brown people. And what are we supposed to say? Like, no, that ain't racist. We're only, like, because only brown people can be here illegally, right? They're not going and flagging down Asians. Let me see your ID, bro. They're not. Are they going around and, finding guys in yarmulkes? Hey, let me see your papers. Maybe you're not from here. No? What are we doing here? Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. If all you're doing is looking at this in terms of left and right, Republican, Democrat, I don't know what to say other than you're just walking in abject foolishness. This issue is severely complex. It's crazily messy. It's not just a binary thing. It's to the point, I'm at a warehouse right now. Most of the people in this warehouse look like the kind of people that ICE could target. Like, I'm looking at this warehouse and I'm like, I would not be shocked if an ICE raid happened right now. Some of these people in this warehouse are probably illegal. Some of them are probably legal. But I would guarantee that if ICE busted up in here, they're not finding that out first, because that's the pattern that they're showing. So I would, look, here's my advice. My advice is not to interfere. As much as I am a conscientious objector to what's going on, I have no intentions of interfering unless it just gets crazy bad. Because it's like in Renee Good's case. You're an unarmed woman going up against armed guys who in some cases taste blood and love it. You're putting yourself in that situation unnecessarily. I have no idea if in her neighborhood, I haven't followed up to see if ICE actually got anybody or not, because that's been buried. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, I don't know. I would hope that if the legal observers would just stand down, we would actually have due process. And ICE would actually confirm before they arrest people, hey, this person's here illegally. We have proof. Okay, fine. If you have suspicions, maybe get an arrest warrant. I've seen videos of ICE agents showing up at people's doors, presenting a warrant for arrest, and the homeowner's like, wait a minute, That's a fake warrant. There's no signature on it, and that's the wrong address for the courthouse. I live here. And they just turn around and leave. This is happening. And whether Republicans want to admit it or not, it's still happening. Your president, the man a lot of you voted for, is gaslighting Republicans about this. Lying. Kristi Noem is just out there calling everyone terrorists. She has no clue what she's talking about. The DHS secretary has no idea what habeas corpus is. These are the people we're dealing with. And I'm a conservative. I am a conservative. Some of you may not believe it, but I am. I've been a conservative my whole life. I used to be a Republican. Those days are gone. They're over. I can't support this party any more than I can support the Democrat Party. Two wings of the same stinky bird. And for you MAGA people, not all of you, some of you MAGA people see this, but for the ones that are just blindly, Trump's my guy, therefore anything he says is the gospel truth, and if he says you're a bad person, dang it, you're a bad person, and I hate your guts. If you're that kind of person, we got some thinking to do. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. We need to be smart. We need to think through this stuff before we just blindly support politicians, law enforcement, activists, whoever. Like things are way more complex than your social media influencers are letting you see. They're called influencers for a reason. And MAGA has them just as much as as the left has them. And in some cases, I would say the MAGA influencers are more sophisticated. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll see if I keep doing this or not. I kind of took a little break there, and I'm kind of loving it so far. This was kind of a fire in my bones kind of thing. I've been sitting on this for a while, and I'm watching people I know who I feel like should know better just get lost in this. It's like, at the end of the day, we're dealing with humanity. Don't let them dehumanize your neighbor. Don't let them turn that Samaritan in your neighborhood into the devil. That is exactly what they want. Both sides of the aisle.